We are continuing to remove some of the paywalls and update some of the content for this, the second year of Phroneo. Please enjoy this post originally published here a year ago and share it with your friends and relations by fasting and prayer. With the Nativity Fast now fast approaching, the topic of fasting is on our minds once again. In a previous post, we discussed some of the practical aspects of fasting, especially the difference between fasting as such, which is abstinence, and dieting. In this post, we will explore the idea that fasting without prayer is akin to prostrations without prayer. Both may be very beneficial to the physical health, but are quite distinct from the spiritual life. Much of what is often meant by prayer in traditional Christian confessions, at least in the first approximation, are recitations of various formulaic texts, morning and evening prayers, daily rules, canons, acathists, Lord have mercies, the Jesus Prayer, the Lord's Prayer, etc. Moreover, it has become accepted, at least it is rarely questioned, that more is better, as the faithful are often encouraged to pray more, especially during fasting periods. I must admit that I have never experienced a gracious warmth which spread through my whole breast from reciting anything 1,000 or 3,000 or 10,000 times, as did the author of The Way of the Pilgrim, and perhaps should not speak about such mystical matters, but I have not yet encountered a coherent and satisfactory explanation of the following verse in the Gospel of Matthew in light of the ubiquitous exhortations to pray more. But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Matthew 6, verse 7. Perhaps the fact that I had not heard a good explanation of this verse says more about me than it does about existing explanations. But perhaps it is not about me, or not only about me. When the hour was at hand, and the Son of Man was betrayed into the hands of sinners, Jesus prayed only 3 times, each prayer, according to the Gospels, consisting of a single sentence, Matthew 26, verses 39 to 45. Many present-day Christians, on the other hand, repeat prayers again and again, perhaps unsure of whether the good Lord heard them the first few times or whether they truly meant in their hearts what they prayed. The latter being a legitimate concern, to be sure. The Holy Apostle Paul's exhortation to pray without ceasing, 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 17, is often referenced in favor of abundant repetition, especially of the Jesus Prayer. I am not an expert on the earliest Christian practices, but it seems as unlikely that Paul was referring to a ceaseless repetition of any formulaic prayer as it is that he would have been able to identify with the experiences of the author of The Way of the Pilgrim. Although some, most notably including St. Gregory Palamas, in his defense of certain hesychast practices, may be interpreted as implying the contrary. Hesychasm, however, is a very different and large topic which deserves to be covered in a separate post. One of the earliest sources for understanding daily Christian formulaic prayer is the Didache, which instructs Christians to recite the Lord's Prayer, likely within a very short Jewish daily prayer rule, consisting of 2 or 3 short prayers, 3 not 3,000 times each day, chapter 8, paragraphs 2 and 3. See a discussion of this rule in a previous post. This thrice daily practice is meant not as ceaseless repetition in an attempt to pray more, but as a way to punctuate the times of day and to fill natural time with spiritual meaning. Evening and morning and at noon will I pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. Psalm 55, verse 17. In other words, reciting Our Father once, not 12 or 40 times, in the morning was understood as sufficient to sanctify the start of the natural day. By many accounts, the earliest monastic practice of prayer was the singing of psalms, and this practice persists today in psalms or portions of psalms, forming the bulk of the monastic daily prayer rule, as well as the liturgical services of the Church. In evaluating this practice, it is important to note that likely, at least initially, the monks did not keep vigil in order to recite a specific number of psalms. Rather, they recited psalms precisely because they kept vigil. Imagine a maiden occupying her time with the singing of love songs while awaiting the return of her beloved. She is not staying awake in order to sing those songs, carefully checking them off a checklist. On the contrary, she sings because she is awake. Her heart is consumed with anticipation, and this is why she sings songs of love and not of lumberjacks or baby sharks. How many love songs she sings, or even which ones, is of no particular importance, and the singing will cease altogether as extraneous as soon as she finally embraces her beloved. The state of being in the presence of God, or of waiting for Him, is not at all the same as the state of carefully counting off the number of psalms, canons, or akathists that must be recited at specific times. The genius Friedrich Nietzsche offered arguably the most meaningful critique and criticism of Christianity, and I dare say, not solely of its Western incarnations. What made this criticism truly powerful was Nietzsche's ability to note the very essence of certain things, and thus it was Nietzsche who offered what may be one of the most profound definitions of prayer as the state of perpetual readiness for the coming of God. Beyond Good and Evil, Chapter 3, Paragraph 58. Very precisely, prayer is a state, not an activity or a task, not a chore or a spell, but a state of being. If prayer is understood in this way, all of the supporting activity, such as the canons, the akathists, the rules, as well as fasting, prostrations, vigils, etc., are but tools to help achieve and maintain the proper state of being ready. Although many of the compositions that we usually associate with prayer also have a teaching aspect with respect to the knowledge of history, theology, or praxis, the value of this knowledge is dubious at best unless it helps us be in the state of perpetual readiness for the coming of God. As we prepare to enter the Nativity Fast, it is important to remember that it is not a time of more repetitions coupled with a vegan diet, but a time of preparing ourselves for the coming of Christ by being in a prayerful state of readiness, by striving to become Christ-like, that is to say, by self-sacrifice in whatever limited and imperfect way we can. The sacrifice of fasting, the sacrifice of almsgiving, the sacrifice of service to others, the sacrifice of worship and prayer. Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. Psalm 141, verse 2. If I can say a prayer once and actually mean it, I will do well. After all, the wise thief didst thou make worthy of paradise in a single moment, O Lord. Ex-apostolarian of the Great and Holy Friday. But perhaps this bar is too high for one who does not fully recognize himself as perishing on account of his sins. See Luke 23, verse 41. If I must repeat the same prayer ad abundantium before one is finally uttered with some degree of sincerity, then so be it. But in this season, I should not talk so much that my own voice is the only one I hear, so much that God could not fit a word in edgewise. For the Lord is neither in a great strong wind that rents mountains, nor in an earthquake or a fire, but in a still small voice that asks, "What doest thou here?" 1 Kings 19, verses 11 to 13. Last but not least, please share Phroneo with your friends and relations. And if a still small voice is asking, "What are you doing here without becoming a paying subscriber?" Go ahead and press the button below. Just once. There is no need to keep pressing it without ceasing.